is our moderator today. Thank you, Beth. If you go ahead and we can get started with the webinar.
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everybody on behalf of CoSA's Education and Training Committee. This is one of our joint CoSA National Archives webinars, and so our speakers today include a state archivist and 2 archivists from NARA who will discuss how they process and provide access to their photographic collections. And also here from the National Archives is Meg Phillips. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to ask Meg to say a few words on behalf of NARA. Meg?
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, excellent. I'm just making sure I'm off mute. Welcome, everybody, on behalf of the National Archives. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all and to learn from you. So I think this webinar series is one of our best examples of NARA and State Archives communicating around archival issues and sharing best practices and just learning from each other. So we really welcome the opportunity to do this, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Meg. Our National Archives speakers for today are Billy Wade and Richard Green. Billy Wade studied history at Salisbury University before beginning his career as an archives technician with NARA's Still Picture branch in July 2000. And since then, he's held 4 different positions within Still Pictures, most notably as a subject matter expert archivist and supervisory archivist since 2016. Richard Green is also an archivist with NARA's Still Picture branch. He joined NARA in 2011 while completing an undergraduate degree in history and psychology from the University of Maryland. Richard later enrolled in the University of Maryland's History and Library Science graduate program to earn his MLS and MA in history. And Tim Baker is our CoSA speaker today. Tim was appointed Maryland State Archivist and Commissioner of Land Patents by Governor Hogan in July of 2015 after serving as Deputy State Archivist for over a decade. And prior to joining the State Archives, Tim was Chief Information Officer for the Maryland Department of Planning and served 9 years in the Governor's office. Tim has presided over one of the largest mass digitization efforts of any state in the nation, and the information that I was given said he's got close to 300 million historical documents scanned and placed online, and I wasn't sure if that meant to say 3 million or 300,000, but if it is 300 million, Tim, I bow at your feet. These efforts serve not only to make these records more publicly available, but to help preserve them by taking these permanent records out of physical circulation. And with that, I'll turn the webinar over to our friends from NARA, starting with Billy Wade.
Hello, can everyone hear me? I want to make sure I'm off of mute too.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So hello everyone. I am Billy Wade. I am a supervisor in the Still Picture branch here at the National Archives. We're actually located at our Archives 2 facility in College Park, Maryland. I'm joined by my colleague, Archivist Richie Green.
Hello. How's it going?
For today's presentation, we are going to be discussing, accessioning, processing, and preservation of digital and analog photography. We're really going to concentrate on mostly on digital photographs and also our new ERA 2.0 system, our electronic record archive. But I have included information in this presentation on traditional photography. We also will include some web page links and information in the PowerPoint that we won't go over into some great detail, but I still wanted to get the information out to everyone. So, of course, here's a pretty picture of our Archives 2 facility. So here in the Still Picture branch, our holdings consist of over about 4,000 distinct photographic and poster series that were either created or accumulated by the federal government. We also house approximately 390 donated series. All told, we have about 14 million traditional analog photographs. This includes prints, negatives, slides, transparencies. We have photographs that date back to right before the Civil War. We also have, since 2009, we have actually been accessioning born digital photography. So far, we have a little over 3 million digital photographs that have come from federal agencies. We also have about 50,000 posters, and then we also have a small group of artwork. Currently, when agencies are scheduling and accessioning analog and digital photography, they use our electronic records archive. We call it 1.0. We actually call it ERA base. So basically, they use this system to submit the transfer forms and also to fill out schedules on records should be either transferred to the archives or for non-permanent records disposed of. Up until October of 2019, we actually ingested all digital accessions into this system. That was actually replaced by our ERA 2.0 system. Currently, agencies are still using our original system to do the transfer forms and the scheduling, but that will change in late summer 2020. When it comes to accessioning, we accession anywhere between 400 to 600 cubic feet of analog photographs per year. But that volume is certainly going down as we receive more digital transfers. Eventually, with ERA 2.0, agencies will have the option to send files to us electronically into that system, which is actually located in Amazon GovCloud. But we're still about a year away from that until that capability is released to the federal agencies. So currently, we basically accept hard drives, thumb drives, CDs, DVDs. We also accept tape, but we do receive a number of transfers on LTO tape, especially for the high volume transfers. These sometimes will come from like NASA, for example. We also have digital transfer format guidance and metadata guidance that we supply to agencies. Right now, we basically recommend that files are transferred in either TIFF, JPEG, JPEG 2000, DNG, and PNG. Almost, I'd say, 80% of our transfers so far have been JPEG files, with maybe 15% TIFF. In some cases, we receive a TIFF and a JPEG. We have received a small number of Adobe digital negative files. But even with this guidance, we do receive a number of proprietary formats, especially like RAW files, camera files, like for like Nikon NEF files. If we receive those in, we generally be transferring them to a non-proprietary format, mostly to DNG, and it will make a JPEG for reference. So we also, like I mentioned, we also have digital metadata guidance, and I'll provide a link to our website here. This actually provides guidance to agencies for what metadata fields that we're looking to see. This could be embedded metadata. This could also be external metadata, say a database dump, if they do have a database. We also supply, and this is just a minimal metadata we're looking for. Do agencies supply all this? In a lot of cases, they don't, and we have to do a lot of metadata work on our end. But this is really what we're looking for. In most cases, it's really the core, description, creator. Is there any rights restrictions? We do receive a small quantity of copyright if the agency accumulated from a commercial source. And of course, file name, and for file names and for directory folders, we do also provide guidance for that. Here's some examples, and if agencies, so basically what we're looking for from agencies is we're not looking for strange characters. We don't want strange characters. We don't like spaces in file names, so we ask them to replace those with underscores and hyphens. We don't want periods within file names. If we do receive those, actually part of our processing is to take care of those issues. We actually use some batch renaming tools. We also like to see every file within a transfer to have its own unique name. We certainly don't want to see 100 files with in different directory folders, say 001.jpg, maybe what the camera had originally assigned it. Because we want every file here at the archives to have its own unique identifier so we can provide proper reference and it can be cited.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the still picture processing. That's the bulk of what I do. Just kind of give a quick overview because we could go into details between the analog and the digital. But in many ways, they're actually similar. In both cases, we would describe the collection as we get it, determine if it's going to be multiple series, a single series. We will, as Billy mentioned, give each photo a unique identifier. In the case of digital, a lot of times we will have to do some renaming, potentially have to do some conversion if, as Billy mentioned, if we get something in a proprietary format. A lot of times we do a conversion just for reference purposes as well. If we have a TIFF, we would make a JPEG just so it's a little bit easier for researchers to use and upload to our catalog. Yeah, there's a few other steps here as well. Again, we could go into it in more detail, but if we have any specific questions, we can go over that towards the end.
And when we rename files, so we're not really renaming them. We're basically usually prepending information. So sometimes if we receive files that say, 001.jpg, we might prepend a folder name to the front of the file. We also organize series here at the National Archives within record groups, which record groups are assigned to federal departments or major bureaus and agencies within those departments. So we basically would maybe prepend the record group number. We also assign letter designators to each of our series too. So if we had 30 series from, say, the Park Service, we also assign a letter designator for each of those series. So we would have a record group, a series designator, and then a unique number after that. And that's how researchers basically would cite or ask questions about our photographs. This is actually included a couple pictures of our stack areas here. We do have a cold storage vault. This is where we actually store our acetate film, color film, also color prints. And then we have a larger cool storage, which is around 55 degrees. This is where we store black and white prints, polyester film negatives, glass plate negatives, posters, and other varieties of 19th century material. Now on to ERA 2.0. Like I mentioned before, this launched at the beginning of October. I would say maybe the last week of September of 2019. The still picture branch here, we were actually asked to test the live system the last week of September. This right here is the landing page for upload into the system. Like I mentioned before, this is an Amazon GovCloud. This will actually be the page that agencies will also see once they start ingesting, electronically sending photographs to us to the ingest process. So here on the upload page, on the left side, we have basic data we have to enter. This data here in this example is actually an in-house digital surrogate. For Born Digital federal records, on the drop-down, we actually would just hit that and the additional options. Each transfer is actually given a transfer request number that we would enter. When files are uploaded, they are virus scanned, checksum hash values are generated, and we'll go to the next screen here. So agencies will have the option to direct upload. We're also looking at cloud-to-cloud transfer because there's also a number of our agencies that are also in Amazon GovCloud. So this is actually an upload in progress. We actually have the progress bar on the bottom, which lets you know how far you are in your upload. You basically add the files. You could add a folder. You could add individual files at once, and then you basically would start the upload. If you actually get, say, a virus scan and there's malware, that file will not be uploaded. It would actually, in the left side, there looks like a little chess piece. That will actually, if you click on that, it will tell you what files failed the upload process. So during the upload and actually other processes in the system, I have a little yellow arrow here with a little bell. We call that the task list bell icon. So you can actually run multiple tasks in the system at once. If you click on that bell, it actually lets you know what the progress is for each of your tasks. It was for upload and then some more batch processing. You'll see that here. And if you click on each one, you would actually see a file-by-file listing to let you know if a file has completed or not, and also if it's failed. Luckily, in this screen there's no failed task. And I should also mention that this system is still in development. We still have close to 600 requirements that need to be implemented. So we're certainly going to still be working on this for a number of years. So now on to our next tab. So that was upload. The next tab basically is the processing area. And what you see on the screen here is the different files, packages basically that have been uploaded to the system. Go next guy here. So NARA, basically with the processing environment, we have the ability to rename files and folders, move files around, share files, update metadata, run embedded tools, and download files. We actually have a little shopping cart. We make a little joke, if you have Amazon Prime, you can actually download it quicker. In addition, staff can launch a virtual workbench, which we'll show you, that has additional like off-the-shelf processing tools. So this is basically just showing a staff member browsing through the processing area. It shows your directory structure where the arrow is. When you click on a file, it actually gives you a preview in the top right corner. Right now, it is only giving previews, I know, for JPEG files at a certain size. Yeah. We have additional functionality to raise those limits. I think once it gets over like 10 megabytes, you just get an error that says file too large to see. You can still download. You can still put it in your cart and download it to your desktop to view it. Now onto the action button. So this is the action drop-down that we see here, and this is where you can create new folders. And it sort of has like a Google Drive feel to it a little bit. So you can actually create new folders. You can delete a selection. It actually doesn't delete it from the system. It deletes it, and then right now only a system administrator can actually clean the trash. Eventually, this would probably be a supervisor for each office. There's a requirement for that. You can also view the metadata. So ERA 2.0 has a metadata database for each file, so you can actually view the metadata. You can move files. You can rename files here. You can share files. So I could actually share this file. As a supervisor, I can actually see everything that's been uploaded for Still Picture Branch. In the role that Richie has, he can only see the things that he's uploaded. But through the share, staff can actually share files with each other in projects. We also have a selection here that says upload metadata from file. We actually have the functionality in this system to take a CSV file and map it to our metadata. So there's actually a metadata mapping tool in the actual system. And once you do that, you actually see the metadata in the database. So we also have embedded tools in the system. So these are really NARA-generated tools that have been developed here. These are just examples of tools. We still have a long way to go with this. I know we plan on eventually maybe adding some more renaming tools to this. So this is tools that we developed that we don't want to go down to our workbench environment that we can run right in the system here. We have a MIME type tool. That tool basically just is a file format identification tool, not sort of like Droid like the UK Archives has, which eventually will be in the system also. This is more of an internet protocol that tells you what type of file it is and how to render it. We also have a fixity tool. Even if fixity is established during ingest, you can reestablish it here. I know if we've done work on the file, it could change its checksum value. So you might want to rerun fixity. And we also have an extractor tool right now that actually extracts JPEGs. And also, actually, I see a question about what metadata schema you use. We'll show our metadata in a second. Actually, it's mostly based on, we'll show when we get there, but it's actually NARA-based metadata, so we have our own unique schema. So this is right here is just showing you add all objects to the cart. So you can add all your objects, basically highlight them, highlight a folder, add it to your cart. Within the cart, you can also view metadata. You can download all your files in a package. And there's several, you can actually run all of the tools from there too. So in this system, there's actually multiple ways of doing the same thing. And here's the metadata. So in our metadata section, we actually have a My tab, descriptive. Too bad I can't actually click on each of these. So these are actually based on NARA's life cycle standards that were developed about 19 years ago. So this is our own, we have our own basic standard guide. Some of these are pretty common fields. You're talking scope and contents, title. We actually have, so we have My tab, descriptive, technical, and some of this is sort of excess metadata, technical metadata about each file that's extracted during upload. We have restrictions, that's copyright, or if there's an access restriction. We have source. There's actually a legislative too, because basically our legislative branch with House and Senate records for using this. There's also required. The My tab is very nice because you can actually, on your My tab, select only the fields you want to see from the other tabs. And here, basically, on mine, I have file name, series of National Archives identifier. This is numbered within our online catalog. Record group number, the type of media that the records came in, it's magnetic media, and reference unit, still pictures. If you went farther to the right, you would also see like item title. You also see our unique photo number, which is basically the same as the file name. We also have extended metadata on the far right, where you can add in actually new metadata. We wouldn't do this for digital surrogates, but it will be for federal agencies who transfer records where they have their own unique metadata fields. We might add that into our fields for online catalog, but we also might want to retain their field titles. So we might actually add new metadata fields in the system.
Yep. Okay, so this is a screenshot of what we call the workbench. Actually, this is a screenshot of moving files to the workbench. The workbench itself is, it acts as more of a virtual desktop, so it actually looks just like a Windows 10 desktop. And it's really where we will be doing more higher level processing in the system, things that wouldn't necessarily be a quick embedded tool, but it's going to have programs. It does have programs such as Microsoft Word, Excel, and a few of the other programs that we use pretty regularly, which I think we have a, yeah, so this is a screenshot of Adobe Bridge. This is actually in the ERA 2.0 workbench. So it's still on the cloud. The idea eventually being that agencies can transfer things to us in the cloud. We won't have to bring it down to our computers or work from a hard drive. We'll be able to do all the processing in the cloud. So we have things like Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Bridge. This is a picture of OpenView, which we use to do file conversions. It's converting a TIFF to a JPEG in this scenario. And all this is within the cloud environment. So it's where we're heading, I would say.
Just real quick, too, eventually this system will also develop relationships. Right now, you can actually relate files. So if you make a TIFF and then a JPEG, you can actually say that with our add as a source or add as a related object. Eventually, this will be automatically done. We don't really use this just yet. Eventually, we'll have an embedded conversion tool that will actually do that for us. So within the metadata, it will say this JPEG is a derivative of this TIFF file. Also with the metadata real quick, so agencies basically are developing their own metadata fields. When we receive that, we treat that just like a record. If it's in, say, a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet, we will preserve that, but we also will then, we'll map that to our metadata fields. And sometimes it's not a pretty fit, especially for our online catalog. Sometimes we will actually have to merge fields together to fit, but we've been pretty successful with it. Real quick, this is just reports, so we'll skip over this section. But we do have reports. These are basically system generated. Eventually, we'll have more reports that can be modified by the user. This is the Discover tab, also in the system. So once you process, you'll be moving stuff over to the preservation system. This is how staff and reference staff can search, download files, and find what you're looking for. It has basically a filtering option. You have a fielded search. missed my slide clicking there. This is an example of basically a fielded search and a filter. Also, when files are uploaded, depending on the file type, it actually parses the data, which if you have a text file, it's sort of like OCR. So if a PDF or Word document goes up, it actually indexes, or Excel spreadsheet, it actually indexes all the data and makes it searchable in the system. Just a picture of the still picture reference room. And our last slide of the day, this is an example of our online catalog. This basically is the mission photography for all the space shuttle missions. About 5 years ago, we received about 500,000 born digital, well, half born digital, half scans from all the space shuttle missions. The NASA images, along with probably our Department of Defense photographs, which we have up to 2007, is about, I would say, a third of our digital holdings so far. Here's a picture, actually, of one of the launches for STS-119 in our catalog, which can be downloaded. And that is the end. I see there was a couple questions over here. With bulk uploads of digital images and limited previews of the scenes, how do you verify that the content of the image isn't restricted or duplicate of another image with a different digital file name? Oh, yeah. Well, we can answer that during the question and answer period.
Okay, well, so I should go ahead and get started. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tim Baker with the Maryland State Archives, and I'm very happy to be with you today. I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about how we receive and process contemporary photos that are taken yesterday or today, and by the state's photographers. We have a number of photographers who, a lot of the events that we photograph are events that involve our public officials, but we also have photographers who work in agencies like the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Planning, and so forth. So I'm going to start really with the old days. And when I say old days, for some, it probably is the real old days, going back 15, 20 years. Of course, things have really changed with the advent of smartphones and social media, but I'll describe here what I just call the state fair nightmare, and I'm familiar with this because I worked on the governor's staff. So, when the governor, I happened to be fortunate enough to work for a governor who was very popular. So when he would go to the state fair, everybody wanted to get their picture taken with the governor, and the photographers, the photographer and the staff person accompanying the governor, you'd have to take copious notes about the individual. You got to get their name, their address. Then you'd have to jot down some information that would allow you to remember what photograph was, like the guy in the Orioles cap eating a hot dog by the Cow Palace. And you go back to the State House, and we developed the film, and then we had this big monster machine that could kick out 8x10 color glossies, and they got put in these cardboard mailers, and very, very expensive. I think the postage at the time was $1 a photo. So what did the archives get at the end of it all? In the best case scenario, the archives was given these big 3-inch, 3-ring binders with 35 millimeter negatives in plastic sleeves. In the worst case scenario, we got nothing. And kind of in a middle road scenario, I mean, for one governor, we got 30 years after he left office, maybe that's an exaggeration, 15, 20 years after he left office, we got a bunch of boxes that had been in somebody's basement with a bunch of water-damaged black and white 8x10. So the new digital era allowed us an opportunity to leverage digital photography with the promise that if the governor and governor's photographers and all the other state photographers, if they would transfer to the archives immediately whatever photographs they had taken, along with a little metadata, we would make them available for download. So here's I'm going to describe narrative format of how that worked, and then we'll take a look at the process and the actual website where you go to download. Then I have a couple slides that will depict this workflow in more of a pictorial way. So as you can imagine, this is, it's fairly straightforward how this works. A photographer goes out and takes a bunch of pictures. He or she goes back to the office, and we have some structured descriptive data that we worked out with them, and so it's real basic stuff: title of the event, the date, the photographer's name, and so forth, and a couple keyword tags that can also assist with searching. They copy the photographs down to a specific machine where we know the IP address, and then we use a FTP protocol to move those pictures to the archives. So once they've put the photos out there, the photographer sends our staff an email alert, and oftentimes, for particularly high-profile events, they really want those photographs uploaded and pushed out to social media right away. So we react very quickly to those emails. We get on and begin a process of validating and verifying the data and processing it up to first a separate server that we use where we have some applications on it that allow us to do such, obviously we want to do some virus checks and that sort of thing, but we also do some checks on the data itself. So once the pictures are validated, they're transferred to some archival storage, and the data the information that the photographers had typed in is transferred to a database server, and then we have ultimately the applications that link the data back to the tabular data back to the actual photograph. And of course, we push the photographs out on behalf of the governor to various social media, including Flickr. So here's what the processing looks like. I know this is very hard to see, but essentially, over on the right-hand side, this little box up in the upper right-hand corner will actually be scrolling through and show you kind of the status of the ingest. The box at the upper left will give you some of the title information and some of the metadata associated with it, and then the box at the bottom left will give some directory information and verifying where those images are going to land in our archival storage. So some of the tools, these are all applications that were all developed in-house using ASP.NET. This is a little tool we call the Event Wizard, which, among other things, not just validates the actual data and makes sure that it is a valid file format, but it also does hashing and photo counts to make sure that we're not duplicating any of the events, because it's a lot of times the photographers, they're not all computer aficionados, so sometimes they'll upload things accidentally twice, or the these tools perform a variety of checks for us. They also allow you to do real-time monitoring here, and as I described earlier, the box in the upper right-hand corner kind of scrolls through and shows you how things are processing, and things will error out and be flagged if any particular file or batch is problematic. And also being depicted here, this gentleman in the picture on the left is my neighbor who lives right up the street from me, also happens to be our distinguished Lieutenant Governor, Boyd Rutherford. All of the event processing takes place within a 24-hour period. We have the ability to go through and reprocess, as well as remove a collection before it gets up to our archival storage, because there, we found that we really had to eliminate all possibilities for human error. For example, if some of the key word data or the name of the event happened to be misspelled by the photographer, we'd want to be able to overwrite that and not have some embarrassing typos out there on our website. So, well, let me just click through that. Here's the web page itself. It usually features there some thumbnails of some of the most recent events that are featured on the website. It also has the ability to provide a keyword search. So if you know what the name of the event, or just some basic information about it. Here we searched on 150th because the archives recently had an event down in the Governor's Mansion where we not just celebrated the 150th anniversary of the laying of the cornerstone of Government House, but we also had taken all the research that we've done over like a 50-year period on the architecture, furnishings, and the occupants, the people who lived in the Governor's Mansion for 150 years. And we published a very nice book, and here's some pictures of the event for what's called the Foundation for the Preservation of Government House. And here are three of my staff people who authored the book with our First Lady, Yumi Hogan. So again, it's entirely searchable, both by just putting in information, but you can also just click on and kind of scroll down through various pieces of information, whether it's date or event listed alphabetically. Now, another very key important piece of this application for us, for the Maryland State Archives, was, we get a new governor every so often. So, and the new governor is going to want the new governor's photos in quote unquote his or her own photo gallery. So, what we designed early on was that we would take any photographic collection, whether it's governor's photos or photos from Department of Natural Resources, and we would use basically the exact same technology and back end to both manage the data and present it in a web-based environment. So here are some examples of some collections that we have available with their own unique web presence, from relatively recent governors to Governor William Donald Schaefer. Actually was governor before there was digital photography. And then we have, here's an example. Mae Warren is the daughter of a very famous Maryland photographer by the name of Marion Warren. And here's some examples of those websites. Here are photos from the William Donald Schaefer collection. These photographs, as you see there, I think we have currently online, looks like 1,452 in this collection. These would have been taken off of 35 millimeter scans, or they would have been scanned off of color prints. Here's an example of a more historic photograph from, it looks like the 1870s, early 1900s, from the Mae Warren collection. So again, it's the back end and the presentation. The presentation is slightly different. We just through the HTML, we do a slightly different design, but they're all basically the same sort of construct. And here's just a picture. Everybody will recognize that fella on the left. No, that's not Colonel Sanders' older brother. That is Governor Warfield, and with entertaining their Mark Twain. So here is generally how our processes work. And as you see at the top there, it says MD Landrec. This depicts the ingestion and storage of our land record collections, which was far and away the biggest collection, with I guess around 200 million images just of land records alone, starting from deeds, mortgages, and certificates of satisfaction and that sort of thing that would have been recorded, last week at one of our 24 circuit courts, to going all the way back to the founding of the colony. And this is basically how these processes work, whether it's for the photographic collection or, in this case, the land records that come to us. We get real-time information downloaded. When I say real-time, I mean like data that was entered yesterday is downloaded from a mainframe and manipulated in some SQL database servers. The images come to us and are transferred into image servers. We use application servers depicted all the way on the right there to manage connecting the databases to the images and serving them up. We will typically have our application, have the archival storage be TIFF or JPEG 2000 file formats. And then our applications actually reach into these image servers, and within the application, we do a conversion to a PDF, and a PDF is actually what is returned to the requester. In the middle there, you see just how we structure our storage arrangement. We keep 2 master copies here in Annapolis, and then we use a tool called SmartSync to mirror our data up to our remote site. You see there it says RR remote site. That's a rolling run. It's a facility on Rolling Run Road up in the Baltimore area. So we replicate our data out there, and so that we can fail over in the event that we would have to do that. And here, the last slide finally is a depiction of the workflow as I described, probably in excruciating detail and in that narrative form earlier. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you have the photographer downloading and editing the pictures and providing the data that we will use to be able to provide searches and sort of intellectual control over what people are able to look at. Those that data and the photograph images are transferred via FTP to our Annapolis facility, where staff will use those tools that I showed you to process them, to push the images over to an image server and the data over to a database server, and then you see out there over more to the right in the upper right-hand corner a depiction of a server that brings the database and the images together and serves them out there to the web. And down finally at the bottom you see a depiction of our pushing those photographs out to social media, in this case the Flickr environment. And so that's what I have. Thank you all for having the interest in this application, and I was very interesting what NARA does. They're always very, very good and very thorough. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Billy and Richard. That was a lot of information packed into a short period of time. And we do have still plenty of time for questions. I would imagine with all that folks do have a lot of questions to ask you. And I say I would imagine that because my chat box is frozen and I can't actually see anything after 2 p.m. So, Lisa, are you able to see any questions in the chat box?
Actually, Beth, there was one actually in question and answer. It was a follow-up to the metadata schema question to Billy and Richard. And Jamie Patrick Burris wants to know, is the file name the unique identifier in all of this?
Yeah, so for reference purposes, our file name is the unique identifier that we use. We actually have a metadata field called local identifier, and that's where we also place we have a file name field, but we also have the file name placed in that field. Now, each system, ERA and even our catalog, does assign a unique identifier to each file that's uploaded. That's because it isn't just still pictures that's loading, our motion picture branch, our cartographic branch. So it could be possible they have some of the same file names as we do. So any good database usually is going to assign its own name. So really our file name, when you see it, is really at this point just metadata. On the back end, it's actually now renamed something different in Amazon Cloud. But when we do download the file, it actually will download with the original file name.
Great, thanks for that. Tim, this question is from Veronica Marzel, and she says, first of all, she is so impressed with how early in the process you've been able to insert the archives. Could you speak to how that process or the negotiations of working with the governor's office and photographers? Yeah, what's your secret? How did you get that great working relationship?
Well, be honest, and I'll tell you that we knew they had a need, a real need, that they, as they were doing away with their 35 millimeter negative cameras and going over to digital, they had no way to serve it up. And my colleague Ed Pappenfuse and I, we went down to see them and said, look, we have the technical capability to create a website where we can put all this stuff up for you, and we believe that we can do this, maybe not in real time, in terms of snap the picture, have it automatic, but, we pretty much next day, and that was so unbelievably helpful to them that and it was it was kind of a risky on our part because we were making this claim that we could do this and weren't totally sure that we could pull it off. But it all worked out.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Beth?
I see that we have a question in the Q&A now. Do you primarily work with photograph collections, or do you also work with photographs found within textual or manuscript collections? My main question is if you separate or transfer photographs out of textual collections, which is a current debate at my repository.
Actually, hi, this is Billy at the Archives, National Archives. This is actually a really good question. We actually have about 40,000 photographs that are setting in textual series here at the Archives. Generally speaking, those records stay with the textual, and our textual division is the custodian for those. The only time we would do an internal transfer of the material to us is if the photographs do not directly relate to the textual records that they're found within. We don't want to sort of break up that relationship. The only time we actually might, in that case, though, would be if it was a preservation issue. We need to put it in our cold vault. In that case, we might just be courtesy storage for our textual branch. Generally speaking, still pictures, we only deal with distinct photographic series. We will receive a little bit of paper records. Of course, with analog, we might receive logs and things like that, some background information. But pretty much we don't deal with, and a good example would be, I know like FBI case files here has a lot of photographs. And with all that, that stays with textual.
And I'll answer that as well and say that we have done that a lot, but it's for very specific purposes, and I'll give you, and it usually has to do with research. So in most scenarios, for example, with newspapers, we're going to want to keep a whole newspaper intact, but we, for a number of years, our Legacy of Slavery program would do what we call record stripping, and that is we would go in and I'm just going to give an example here. We would go in and take an image of a runaway slave ad, and then we would keep that image, but also take the information out of the runaway ad and put it in a database so that we could analyze that and try to figure out, really in an attempt to figure out who were in the enslaved and the slavers, and ultimately the goal would be to try and develop a narrative, if you can, about these individuals. And oftentimes we're only going to be able to just have that basic information, but it's you'd be surprised how other ancillary data could, whether it's birth records or chattel records or inventories from probate records, where you can make linkages to people and sketch out a narrative of an individual.
Beth, we have another question.
You. Yes, I see another question in Q&A, and the question is, do you describe photographs at the item level, and if not, what criteria do you use to determine the level of description? What deserves item or folder or box level description?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So here at NARA, we actually do all three. I know with born digital photography, when it comes in, it really will depend on what the agency did, because some cases they might have item level metadata, or they might have what we call group level, where it's really at the photographic assignment level. In that case, in our catalog, we have item level descriptions, and then we have what you would consider at the folder, which is group level. We have that level. We basically have item and file unit. If it's analog material that we're digitizing, in a lot of cases that will depend on researcher value. Also, do we have captions for at the item level? I know for a lot of our military right now, we're doing a lot of War I photography digitization. For that, we are doing the item level captioning. But there's other series where we maybe didn't have that information, or we just didn't think the researcher value was there. And you also have to look at resources that we just did at staff resources, that is, actually do the metadata, where we just did it at a group, at a folder level or a box level. So when you look at our catalog, you'll see a file unit description with possibly maybe little thumbnails of all the images, or you could still possibly maybe see item descriptions under each one with minimal information.
I would just echo what my friends at the National Archives say, but I would just add that we do it on a case-by-case basis and based on opportunities. And what do I mean by that? So, for example, several years ago, Governor Mandel, who was governor in the 70s, passed away, and we had been working on scanning a lot of the black and white photos from his time in office and before. And at his wake, I happened to run into some of his old staff people and some old reporters, and I said, well, we have all these photographs, and we're not sure who's in all these photographs, and would you guys be interested in coming down and sitting around a table and looking up at a big screen and helping us describe? And I also invited, and it turns out this was a great idea, invited the guys who served as the executive protection, the state troopers who served the governor at that time. Those guys are with the governor all day long, and they have incredible memory of who and what and where. And so that was just kind of an opportunity that presented itself. And it took us years to really to take the information that we gathered in 2 afternoons and actually embed all the names and the events and all that information into the digital images. But we just finished that after we had an intern working on that for a long, long time, and it was well worth it.
Great. Thank you. And I think we've got time for one last question here before we wrap up. The question is, with bulk uploads of digital images and limited previews of the scenes, how do you verify the content of the image isn't restricted or duplicate of another image with a different digital file name?
Here at NARA right now, because agencies are still sending material on hard drives and CDs and tapes, we're still doing a lot of processing and verification before the files are loaded. So we're still using a lot of tools on our desktop to view the files. Because we do receive, you have differences in restrictions. You have use restrictions for copyright. In a lot of cases, unless that's been indicated, we wouldn't know. I mean, the 99.9% of images are in the public domain, but agencies will even get born digital images that are copyrighted. So unless that's been put in the metadata, either embedded or in the external metadata, we might not know. But in a lot of cases, we have caught that where that's been in the metadata and maybe not even indicated on the transfer forms. So we have to sort of review all of that. Access restrictions. Our ERA system is not a classified system. We do have classified digital images that's handled by a completely different system on site. But we do have other FOIA restrictions for sensitive but unclassified that we have to review for. So we do have to look at every image, or try to look at every image before it's we load it into the system. Now in the future, when agencies start loading, a lot of that work's going to be done in the workbench. For duplicate files, we actually do have a duplicate file finder that looks at the technical information for each file to let us know where duplicates are. We can batch delete those, but in a lot of cases we'll print out the list and then look at each file. Because in some cases you might have files in multiple folders that were stored like that on purpose by the agency. Maybe folders by subject, and this file related to 2 different subjects, and that's why they're there, so we might not delete them. But in some cases, though, we certainly will delete some duplication. It really all depends. It's a case-by-case basis.
And I guess I would have to answer that question by saying the things that the material, whether it's record material or photographic material, that we upload and place online in bulk, we have already predetermined that that's all in the public domain, and so we don't really concern ourselves with trying to figure out if something's restricted or duplicative.
All right. Well, Billy, Richard, Tim, thank you so much. That was a 3 great presentations and a lot of really good questions and answers. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to Lisa for some additional announcements.
Thank you, Beth. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you will continue to stay connected and informed, and this page just shows you several of the ways that you can stay connected through CoSA, the website, the Resource Center. We have a Twitter handle, and of course, Facebook. On the NARA side, of course, they have a website, a Twitter handle, a Facebook page, and a social media directory. So don't hesitate to use these resources to stay connected and continue asking those great questions. We really do appreciate your feedback. So as you exit this webinar, you will be asked to do an online evaluation for us. Do take a minute to do that, please. That really does help the Education Committee as they plan future webinars, as we know what topics are of interest to you. So we'd like to thank you guys for attending today, and look for the next. Now we have our CoSA member webinar this next week. In fact, next Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern will be an emergency preparedness webinar. Our next CoSA-NARA webinar will actually be in September. So stay tuned, there'll be notices about these. We'd like to thank everyone for welcoming us. Beth, any final words?
I have no final words. I muted myself and had to take a moment to unmute myself again, but I just want to thank everybody for joining us.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.